I'm Corey, and this is the Hardcore Skeptic Examines.
Now is the time for me to rise to my feet. Wipe your spit from my face, wipe these tears from my...
Hi there, and welcome to the Hardcore Skeptic Examines, the show where I do a series of interviews and a bunch of research on a single topic in an effort to better explore and understand it. The first subject I chose for this endeavor is social justice. I did a series of interviews with people who are pro and anti-social justice so that I could learn what the objections were to it and how they were responded to. This is episode 6 in this series, and in this episode I interview Ed Smith from the Wayward Atheists podcast. Ed, as I would describe him, is not so much anti-social justice as he is a person who simply takes issue with some of the behaviors and philosophies that go along with social justice. Just as a matter of housekeeping, I have to say that I was going to approach this episode from a slightly different angle and try to get Ed's responses to any thoughts I might have about the interview. But Ed and I are no longer friends, so I guess I'll just do things the way I did with other interviews. And if he doesn't like it, then so be it. With that though, here's my interview with Ed Smith of the Wayward Atheists podcast.
It's the time for me to rise to my feet. Wipe your spit from my face, wipe these tears from my eyes.
So I'll start off with an introduction. Who are you?
Okay. Ooh. Who am I?
Who are you?
Well, I'm Ed Smith of the Wayward Atheists podcast. I'm ex-Mormon, part Native American, part European, of European descent. I have a degree in anthropology and a minor in Aboriginal studies, and 2 diplomas in forestry, wildlife conservation. And I'm an anti-theist, so
Cool.
that's basically me in a nutshell.
That's Ed Smith in a nutshell. Right on. So, what to you is social justice?
Well, I've been trying to rack my brains about how to define it because many people have different definitions, obviously. That's one of the reasons that starts with the confusion that we're into a lot of the times. And if someone were to say, are you for gay rights? Absolutely, 100%. Are you for transgendered rights? Obviously. I mean, we're human beings. Everybody deserves respect and dignity. Sure, by all means. But I think that's, I'm for equality between men and women. Obviously. I mean, that's a no-brainer. These things are just common sense things, but I don't really understand what the social justice part is by definition. I just think these are things I believe in, but I don't consider them social justice. It just seems to me like a really forced word to try to define certain things.
Okay. So I guess in a sense you kind of see it as almost a waste of a term. It's when it's already covered by these other kind of ideas. Right.
I think it kind of gives this, I don't know, in my head when I see social justice, I can't picture, all I picture is this judge with a gavel trying to say which is right and which is wrong. And I don't think life works that way except for in the criminal court system, you know?
Right. Yeah, there does seem to be an awful lot of shades of gray when we're dealing with complex issues.
Right. And there's lots of nuance in between each position. So, and I think this is the one reason that I really jumped at the chance to talk with you about this, because everybody has their own ideas and no one wants to sit down and talk about them.
Yeah, it does seem to be like, it seems to be a subject where people just argue on the internet and nobody's really sure. Like, everybody's got their own ideas, but nobody's really talking about what the difference in those ideas is.
That's right. And no one can agree on everything. Like, even within the same quote unquote group, and I'll put that loosely, they don't all share the same ideas.
Right. Yeah. Like, even if one were to look at, say, feminism, like there seems to be different aspects of feminism and different activist type ideas or groups even that disagree with one another within that broader spectrum.
Yeah, feminism, when we talk about feminism on the internet, people think it's a monolith. Everybody that is for equality of men and women belong to this large group called feminism. But within that group, there's hundreds of different factions within it. Like there's TERFs, people that don't like transgendered women. There's all kinds of different faction, no one seems to agree, but they all want to use the same umbrella term, which I find problematic.
Yeah, for sure. I even find like the idea of different waves of feminism, and like there's a lot of people really push back against third wave feminism, but even within this third wave feminism, there seems to be a lot of back and forth and a lot of disagreement about ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, it's about respecting human being. What I'm about is respecting humanity in itself. I'm a humanist, basically. I rarely use labels for myself. So,
Right.
like, when you say I'm anti-SJW, I kind of go, I don't like that label. I'm not a label. I always kick. I'm a kid of the 90s, so I kick against labels, like, so.
Yeah, I the thing about, like, it seems pretty easy to find the people who are pro social justice, but there's a pushback against that in a sense, but I don't know what to call that, because none of the people that I've talked to are actually anti what we're calling social justice. They all just have problems with different aspects of the way things are handled.
Well, yeah, I think what really starts on to really muddy the waters is this authoritarian fragment of what's going on. We have on the right, we always knew that there was a fascistic element to the right and the far right.
Right.
But when I was growing up, the left was seen as the epitome of open and free speech and dialogue and bashing out ideas to try to get the best quality arguments put forward. But now you're seeing this slippery slope to authoritarian principles, where if you don't like what I have to say, then I have the right to punch you, or I have the right to shut you up. And those ideas are a grease precipice that I don't want to slide down, because I think no matter if they're good ideas or bad ideas, they need to be heard, because they need to be dusted off. And to see where the truth lies, you have to be able to compete with those ideas. And I don't mean just compete as in debating them. You have to look at each of them individually and see where you stand, and to see where the merits are, where the information and evidence lies. And most often it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, I'm not saying that, don't get me wrong, there's racist ideology out there on both sides of the fence.
Right.
And I'm not talking about racist ideology. I'm talking about the issues that we're talking about. Like, say for instance, gay rights. There was a landmark case where a cake decorator was just lost, was fined $130,000 because they didn't want to bake a cake for a gay couple.
Right.
Now, I can see that in two ways. One way is you didn't have to buy your cake there. You could have went to someone else. And I can also see it as, well, we're living in a time where everybody should be accepting of whoever they are, and love should trump everything.
Right.
And somewhere in the middle is the real answer. It's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Like, I guess in regards to the cake thing, I think that's a really interesting example, because we had something, because there's also a photographer who also didn't want to work at gay weddings, and there wasn't the same reaction because of the difference in the industries. It's like, it's almost like it's hard to draw these hard lines all over the place. Right? You have to take each case on its merits and individual kind of ideas.
Oh, exactly. I mean, and that's where I think we're losing the real game here. And this is why I push back against a lot of the online chatter, is because there is no discussion about what's right and what's wrong. It's, I have an opinion, and whatever that opinion is, if you don't agree with it, then shut up. Step out of the way. And I find that very problematic. Corey, for instance, me and you, we don't agree on everything.
Right.
But we're still friends, and we could talk it out.
Yeah. It seems like that should be the way that everybody kind of deals with people.
Right. But we got people promulgating punch a Nazi. I don't like Nazi ideology. And let's be honest, the Nazis stopped taking membership in 1945. I mean, come on. they're fascists. So you're talking about fascists, but even that term has been watered down to such such a level that it could be used on anybody, and just to shut down a conversation because you don't agree with my opinion, you're a fascist. No, you haven't even heard what I just don't agree with you at the present moment, but you haven't heard my reasons why I don't agree with you.
Right.
So why would you call me a fascist? I've spent my life fighting fascists. This is something that I really am strongly about, and I don't like authoritarianism. So the left's answer to fascism, both ideologies to me are horrid, but I'm not going to say that. You water it down, anything becomes permissible at that point, because when someone called me a fascist say if someone called me a fascist in the 90s, no one ever did. I'm just saying that if they did, that would have hurt me so bad because those ideas were so repugnant. But now it's become so watered down that being called a fascist is no different than being called an idiot online. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually rarely use the term bigot or even racist, but one time I did. And the person I was discussing this with, I said, that's a bigoted idea, what you're talking about right there. And he said, if coming from a left libtard like you, he said, being called a bigot is a compliment. And I oh, okay. So I guess we just can't, how do we even talk now?
Well, I mean, it's been watered down so much. I mean, people are bigots. Again, I hate when you use a word so much, it loses all meaning. When you assign it to innocuous comments, let's say that's racist. Okay, for instance, when I was growing up, I was like I told you, I'm part Native American and part European descent, and I was told that I had to choose a side.
Okay.
Either I was Native American or I was of European descent. I couldn't be in both. It's like having one foot in a canoe and one foot in a boat, and that they're starting to drift away from each other, and I would fall in.
Right.
So when my response back was, no, I cut off the end of the canoe, stick the end of the boat on it, and make a skanoe and go through.
Right.
Take the best out of both worlds. And that's my thoughts on a culture. One of the things that people talk about nowadays is cultural appropriation.
Right.
Well, the reason why people are appropriating parts of other cultures is not because they're stealing it and they want to devalue it. These are the best parts of different cultures that people want to embrace. They want to share it and keep it alive. Just put it like let's look at the Parthenon, for instance. The Parthenon, it was for the Palace of Athena, and all the crap that went on, sacrifices and shit like that happened. But I can go there now and appreciate the Parthenon today without having that cultural baggage or the religious baggage behind it. And some of the stuff that we're doing, like in Canada alone, we have a multicultural country. So we have multiple cultures here, and we try to integrate into society, into the construct of Canada. We share each other's cultures. So they come here and say from Somalia, they have to adopt our culture of clothing style, or they'll freeze to death. There's these cultural milieus that we have to share with one another to appreciate each other, and that's something that I think that people are losing it. I'm not trying to steal anything from you. I'm trying to combine it with my already preconceived notion to expand it, to make me a better human being, to embrace another person's way of life. So I mean, I don't get this. I'm robbing this from you. I'm trying to make myself better by adopting the best of your culture. I don't. That's the way I see it.
I think there's something to that. There's often I find cultural appropriation gets thrown around quite a bit. And I think there might be cases of it, like where it is a piece of a culture is taken and credit isn't given back to that culture. Like nobody's saying, well, this belonged to that culture first and that we learned from them. But there's also these cases where people are fully willing to say, well, I got this from Greek culture, or Jamaican culture, and this is something that I really appreciate about it. And that's not the same type of theft. I don't think it's not, like you say, like one's a type of theft and one's almost just an appreciation of, and like you say, a self-improvement.
Well, I mean, back, like say when the dawn of humans, modern humans came about, when different groups went into different areas and met up with other different groups of human beings, and they had different lithic or stone culture. They exchanged ideas about how to nap a certain piece of rock, or you see different cultures emerging based upon the meeting of these two minds and coming up with new technology.
Right.
That we've been doing it forever.
Yeah, and it's like how cultures evolve, basically.
Right. And so I don't think anything belongs to one particular culture, in some respects, because I think it's better when we work in harmony with each other to make everything seem, everybody as part of the one race, the human race. Right. We are all humans. And when we start picking sides and who or what team I'm a part of, we lose that connection, I think, and we start to divide and subdivide, and then chaos ensues. I mean, I don't like that. I mean, you're in a different part of my country, and I'm in a different part of your country, but we have different cultures where we live.
Yeah.
But we are all Canadians, and so I don't know. Maybe I'm going on too much about that, but it's something I find very peculiar about factionalization of society.
Do you think that there is a lot of this separation based on race or gender or sexual preference that's going on?
Of course, there is a lot. Like, I'm having arguments online that I forgot how to argue because I thought racism, and maybe I'm naive, but I thought racism was dead in some respects. You see the oddball KKK guy that you knew was an oddball idiot, and so you made fun of him. But now you're seeing black supremacists, white supremacists, Asian supremacists. We're seeing all these factions coming out and trying to, I don't know. Like, I've seen a poster. It was a picture taken of a poster that was put on a telephone pole by a group in the United States, and Antifa is the group,
right?
And it said that you shouldn't mix with whites because we're trying to exterminate them. And I'm like, oh, wow, that blows my mind. How could anybody have that much hate for one? I mean, I can't fathom whites hating blacks the same way. I'm reading Martin Luther King, and I'm reading his speeches, and one of the, a line that always pops in my head is, one day I dream that people will be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. And I think that we've lost that great movement that he brought forward today. We're losing that totally, and we're getting more factionalized based on skin color, and it blows my mind.
Or do you think that this attitude by extremists is a reaction to something that exists, or do they are they reacting to just something that they perceive, or are they just off the wall? Like, where do you think that comes from?
There are perceived grievances. I mean, and I don't mean perceived. I think there are actual grievances within the African American communities in the United States, for instance. I mean, there are serious grievances where they've proved that there were white cops that have killed African American, unarmed African American, and I think there is a retaliation to that. But I think that there's an underlying assumption that everybody that's white is that way, and there's an underlying subculture within the black community that is fringe, that is a black supremacist. Just like in white culture, we have those fringe morons that are white supremacists. And when you're told for a long time, in many generations, that you're a victim on either side, then you start looking for perpetrators of that victim, of the damage that's being done, because you believe that you're a victim. And I'm not saying that there's not victimization in the black community, and don't get me wrong, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying the same thing could be said about the white community.
Right.
And I hate talking on skin color terms. It just really bothers me, because to me it doesn't matter what color you are. What matters is the content of your character. But what I see is that when you're told that, you look for perpetrators, and whether it is real or not, you will see somebody as the person oppressing you, and it is to rise above that kind of crap and actually. But there is much more happening in the United States than people want to give credit for, and it has nothing to do with race in many respects. It has more to do with class, poverty versus, well-off versus really poor. And one way to dissuade people is to tell them that you're superior to the other person, and they're the reason why you're being dragged down. And that's a powerful motivator for hatred and bigotry. And if you really want to look at it, the holy text of any religion, that of the three monotheism, they are the ones that breed that kind of sentiment in some respects. And you try to move away from that. And you try to see.
There's been actually, that's something that's come up in a lot of my interviews, is that religion. I guess maybe it's a biased sample size because everybody's an atheist or a skeptic, but the idea that religion is a particularly good tool at othering people has come up quite a number of times.
Of course. You look for the mandate for misogyny, genocide, bigotry, prejudice, slavery. Look no further than the Bible or the Torah or the Quran. It's on every pulpit, synagogue, or mosque.
That's my initial way of getting into where I guess I consider myself social justice advocacy was with the gay rights, and the reason that I got into that was not necessarily because I was starting out from a position of being on side of LGBTQ people, because I had some pretty problematic opinions in my youth, but it was more of because religion was against this, then it couldn't be that bad. It was like a very...
Well, again, I don't like to label social justice. I've always been outside after I left Mormonism, because Mormonism has some very strict ideas about homosexuality, as well as race as well. So
right.
When I left that, I had to, when I deconverted from Mormonism, my ideology, like all the things that I thought were true for the majority of my life, were wiped out. So I had to read, I had to seek out conversations and seek out different areas to find out, where do I stand now? And so when you look at some of the predispositions that I had, one of the biggest obstacles I had to face was homosexuality, because that was such a you're told from day one that it's a sin and you're going to hell, and and then I started meeting gay people, and then I realized, well, what the hell were these people talking about? That these are horrible,
right? And
I'm thinking. And then I would see the love one man had for his boyfriend, and then and you see just the intense emotional impact that they had to one another. Just light bulbs just started shooting off my head that this was perfectly normal and natural. And then that's before I even got to see the science behind it,
right?
And to see how the science was secondary to the actual thoughts. So
the idea that there's obviously nothing morally wrong with this.
That's right. And that's the type of thing so I don't consider it social justice. I think it's a worldview change that really, really changed. But I have friends who are gay, and I'll fight tooth and nail for their rights to marry and to be full citizens in the country. Why not? That's just a human thing to do.
For sure. So what do you think of some of the pushback against some of these social justice advocates or social justice warriors or whatever we're calling them? Where do you think some of that's coming from? Like, I imagine there's certain areas that you feel need to be pushed back on.
Oh, of course. A lot of it is about the authoritarianness of some of the movements that are coming. Like, we've discussed free speech. I'm an free speech absolutist. I believe that everybody has the right, no matter how bad their ideas are, they need to be aired out into the open light so that people can ridicule them, if nothing else. The idea that you want to silence somebody because they don't agree with your opinion really sets me off. I have to push back. I feel like it's one of the reasons why I would get off the couch to do something is to defend free speech.
What is, I guess you kind of said what you mean by absolutist, but what do you mean by silencing? In what way do you think that people silence free speech? What are some of the ways that that you've seen that you react to?
When I see Berkeley, for instance, UC Berkeley, the bastion of the free speech movement of the 60s, descend into Molotov cocktails and people being attacked and violent, stones are being thrown at buildings and that type of thing is very oppressive. I'm not talking about protest. Protest is the exercise, is someone exercising their free speech. What I mean is the violent and outbursts that close down someone speaking, or the ridiculousness of not encountering an idea, like, oh, I can't listen to this idea, so no one else can. That kind of thing. Shutting down a speech, to me, instead of challenging the speaker afterwards and saying, well, wait a second, this is not quite right, and this is why. Those type of things. Like I'm the type of person who would have went to see Milo Yiannopoulos, not because I agree with him, because I wanted to hear what he has to say, so that I can refute what he had to say. And I think that's the biggest problem I see with these protests, quote unquote, in the United States, is they want to shut down before they actually hear what someone says, because they already have a preconceived notion that it's going to be a bigoted statement or it's going to be something against who they are. And it might not be. What that person says might be a nuanced position that you've never heard, or it could have been bigoted. But here's the reasons why you should attend, because this is what you need to fight against. First principles are always what you should be striving to get. How do you know that? How do you know that there is no God? Or how is it that you know that evolution is true? How do you know that you're not a bigot if you don't hear someone speaking this stuff? Right? You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to be confronted with ideas to understand why you're fighting you have opposition to that idea. And I think that's something that we're losing.
It's interesting.
I'll just use this as an example.
Sure.
One of the things that I hear around is that we need to get bad ideas out of the conversation. And they say, oh, in science, well, creationism, because we know that all the evidence indicates that, no, it's not true. But you don't see scientists actively stopping someone speaking about creationism. You don't see scientists saying, protesting a creationist meeting. What you see is letting them speak to their audiences, and then saying, well, here's why it's wrong. Here's the evidence. You have the right to make up your own mind. And that's one of the things that when we had our small debate on my show, and one of the things I didn't get out was we talked about personal autonomy, how people should not infringe on your personal autonomy, but people should not infringe also on your mental autonomy. They can't tell you what to think. They can't tell you who you can read or what you can say, because that is who you are. That is part of who you are. It makes up who you are. So if I'm telling you that this is what you have to say, then I've already subjected you to a form of slavery in some respects. And I don't mean slavery as in bad. I mean I'm co-opting your thoughtfulness, and that's no different than a religious person. They're co-opting your thinking pattern. And I've been suppressed enough as a Mormon to never want to have that for anybody.
Do you think that is something that's happening in a broad spectrum, like out in the world, or is that something that's kind of just isolated incidents, or do you think they're just happening mostly on campuses, or
well, campuses are usually the first symptom of societal change. So good or bad, if something is moving within the university campus, it's usually there because it's when people experience ideas for the first time. Okay, so So any new ideas that come up, any new social movements that are being, it usually starts at the university level and then disseminates into the general masses. And so when I see things like this happening at UC Berkeley, it kind of makes me go, we're losing the plot. These are supposed to be the bastions of free inquiry, free thought, skepticism, fact. We're not supposed to be dogmatic in it. We're supposed to be open-minded to the evidence, wherever it leads us. And I mean, the only thing I could think of is when I was in university, I was exposed to the concept of human evolution in a more in-depth way than I've ever been. And the day I picked up a replica of Lucy's skull, I kind of went, wow, where is this race crap coming from? Because we all can trace our lineage back to this one, and not just Lucy, but to these ancestors of ours. What the fuck are we fighting for? And I'm sorry to swear, but that's how
fair.
I feel.
Yeah. No, that's that seems fair. So we've spent a bit of time talking about free speech.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that sometimes people use terms like racist or sexist to just end a conversation?
Oh, absolutely. That's like the word Islamophobe. Islamophobia to me is a shut down conversation. Stop all the press. That's it. We can't discuss it any further. It's not the same as anti-Muslim bigotry, okay? Because I can criticize Christianity. No one calls me a Christophobe. I can criticize Judaism, and no one calls me a Judophobe. Islamophobe is there to shut down the conversation. It's specifically a label that once it's attached to you, no one wants to speak to you about issues, and that's a horrifying thought. Because I'm not talking about individual Muslims, because individual Muslims are humans that are off limits because that would be bigotry. When I'm talking about ideas like Islam, that's something. All ideas are open to criticism, no matter what they are, and there should be no sacred cows. We should be able to scrutinize and criticize the ideas to make them better. You know what I mean? And to find out the truth. And to say that I'm Islamophobic because I'm criticizing the tenets of Islam, I think is just to shut down the conversation. And again, if someone says, you're white, therefore I can't speak about black issues, even though it might be on economic terms and we might have the same issue, it seems kind of counterproductive.
Do you
Same
think...
way if...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say vice versa. If it was someone said to a black person, you can't talk about this because it's a white issue. To me, that's so ridiculous. It's beyond words.
Do you think that a person, based on the color of their skin, might have a different experience even in the same economic situation?
Sure. The problem is an individual could have a different experience. When we start collectivizing that idea and put it upon a broad swath of human beings, then we kind of are missing the point, as far as I'm concerned. Because when we talk about groupthink or collectivization, I start to get scared, and because again, I don't like labels and I don't like people adding me to groups. Because I think that it's kind of no one group will have all my ideas in it.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And no one is living my life. So my experiences are totally different from the groups. Like, I mean, Dave's story.
Yep.
For instance, Dave lived a hard life.
Yep.
But I had a similar, but not as crazy in some respects as that. But that's my experience. I can't say that every white person now has to have that, same experience.
Do you think that there are certain experiences that can be extrapolated into the larger group?
Sure, can. I mean, like when we were talking about African Americans in the United States that have been collectivized, using a word, into a ghetto type situation that hasn't helped. I mean, shutting down schools in their areas. I mean, those type of things do have a societal consequence at the end. But I'm not talking about when I'm talking about that they might have something to offer a community. I'm not saying that negates that. What I'm saying is that other person could have something to share that could help the cause. And by saying no because of skin color, then we negate great answers that could come up that could help either case.
Right.
Say, you know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like you say, like you could have a great solution to a larger economic issue, but if you're judging people based on the color of their skin, then you might not hear it.
Right.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. So how do you view the I guess we were kind of talking about the interplay between groups and individuals, and yeah, I'm kind of curious about your take on just the interplay of groups and individuals.
I think when we tribalize things, when we set things down to us versus them, that sends a dynamic that leads usually to violence. Doesn't lead to good discussions. It doesn't lead to, I mean, let's for instance, atheists, for instance, we share one thing in common.
Right.
But there's a myriad of different opinions about where to come to that. So when you say, oh, all atheists believe X, well, I can tell the person who says that, I'm going to say you're full of shit, because no,
right. Yeah.
We're different. We're different, and because we're individual, and because now we can share certain ideas together, but putting us all into a group and collectivizing all of us into a group makes no sense, because you'd have to share a wide range of ideas that may not be. So I'm for individual rights, individual freedoms, and it's about the individual. And we've seen through history that the most successful, the most free societies are the ones that favor the individual over the collective group.
Do you think does that present possibly a problem for like governmental agencies or like even society as a whole if they want to address certain systemic inequalities? Like
what? Because I have to see get a framework for what you're saying.
Well,
so what do you mean by societal inequalities?
If there is a tendency towards not hiring black people, how would we address that on an individual level versus a societal level?
Well, you do, yes, but that is not because okay, let's try with the individual level. The individual level is that all people are created equal. Every human being has the right to a job, or not to a job, but to the opportunity to be able to do that freely. Yeah. They have the right to their own mind and free. So you start with the individual rights first, and then you move up to the society. Once once everybody in the society, individual, has the same basic rights, then you shouldn't have. In my thinking, you shouldn't have those societal differences. It's when one person tries to impose their what they determine is to be correct onto another person, and start negating rights of the person, then you start muddying the waters. I hope that makes sense. It didn't sound very smart when it came out of my mouth. Let me see if I can rephrase that again. It's when you impinge freedoms. Like, one of the worst things was, especially in the American South, was. And let's take it for here in Canada, the Aboriginal peoples were seen as less than human.
Right.
They were seen, so they weren't given the individual rights of agency, of autonomy, of being able to be who they were for their own sake. Once those individual rights are set in stone, then it kind of prevents someone else from taking those rights. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It works its way up through society. Because if you do it the other way and say, okay, we got to fix this group, then you get things like quotas, and that's always really bothered me. Quota system, for instance. Let's take we use this on an example of your latest podcast, or maybe it was the one before, when we were the Wayward Atheists was on Brainstorm. We talked about how when Justin Trudeau came into power, he said if we wanted 50% women and 50% men in his cabinet. And on the face of it, sounds wonderful. It's really progressive. Way to go, Justin. You did something great. But I think that negates it negates women in some respects, because what if 100% of women were qualified for the position, but 50% had to be turfed out because they had needed a 50% quota for men? And what if none of the men were qualified? You know what I mean? And yet you just have to start stuffing unqualified people into positions because we have a quota system. And then that starts to play wonky with how your country's run.
Yeah. I wonder, because it seems to me that everybody that he placed in those positions is qualified for their position, right?
But I'm not saying that in the future it might not be.
Right. I wonder, like, if you don't have a quota system and say you have a pool of people who are all qualified for this position, and in general, you're going, like, due to unconscious bias or due to whatever other factors, without these quotas, you might end up with more of one group than another group undeservedly. And
can we talk a little bit about that unconscious bias for a moment?
Absolutely.
What the hell is it? Because if I'm unknowingly, how can I ever affect change to it? It's unconscious, meaning I have no control over it. There is nothing I can do to change that.
Well,
so to me, it seems like a moot point to even talk about.
Except that's actually a field of research that's going on right now. Is this idea that can we change our unconscious bias once we acknowledge that it's there? And it's a field of research that isn't 100% figured out yet. But I wonder, would perhaps quotas help on a higher level, on a societal level, to mitigate some of our biases that we may not be able to work around otherwise?
I don't think so. I think that, again, a quota system, it seems to me to favor. It's just almost like a tactic to say that I'm doing good. Look at me. It doesn't. It's never works out the way it's supposed to. Because on paper it sounds great. It looks great because yes, we want more women in politics. Yes, we want more women at the head of politics. We want, we want more women leaders. We want, men to do really well as, But having a quota system to me sounds really problematic because it could work because the person that gets the position they're always thinking in their heads, and I would be, because that's how I look at things, the way I would look at it. Did I get this because I merited the position, or did I get it based on my gender? Right. And that's something that would play on my mind, and I would always have to equate, and I would never feel comfortable unless I knew it was based on merit and not by skin color or my gender or sexual orientation. If we just base it on criteria like that, then it's at the subjective whim whoever puts you in there, and you'll never know if it's based on who you. And again, it goes back to, like I said, that Martin Luther King quote: "Let's do it by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin or their gender or what have you. Let's do it by who they are as an individual."
Okay, no, that seems like a fair concern. We're coming up on just about an hour, so I'm going to hit you with my last few questions.
Okay.
So what is something that you wish people realized about social justice?
I would wish that they would remove the freaking term altogether and just focus on the issues that need to be worked on. If there's inequality, let's find it and work it out. Like, if there's inequality for women, let's work that out. If there's inequality for men, let's work that out. If there's inequality for white people, let's work that out. If there's inequality for black people, let's work it out. Asians, same way. Whatever. Let's focus on the key issues. Let's hear the best arguments for both, for either way, and let's get to the true solutions. Labeling it social justice seems to me to make it a mockery of it in some respects. Sorry, that's just how I see it.
That's fine. No judgment here. What if you had to criticize the people that you tend to agree with? Or even yourself, if you had to criticize your own reaction to social justice movements or some of these topics, what would you say about that?
Well, the easiest one is to criticize myself. Sometimes I could care less about people's feelings in some respects because I will go by facts, evidence, and I'm not that I'm cold-hearted, but I like to see the numbers because I've been fooled too many times by feelings. especially being Mormon. You everything's you feel the Holy Ghost, crap.
Oh, okay.
You've been fooled so many times that you want to get the empirical and evidential basis of everything first. So my biggest criticism, sometimes maybe I should add a bit of emotion to it and not be so cold especially when I'm discussing things because I too tend to deal with numbers.
It's fair enough. I think that that's a perfectly legitimate self-criticism. That's good. I think that's just about everything I got. We didn't touch on a lot of these, but we had a good conversation anyway. I guess if I was going to ask you one other thing, it would be the idea that do we spend a lot of time talking about ourselves as a left versus worrying about what the right is perhaps doing?
That's not an easy question. Yes and no. Yes, we need to direct our focus on ourselves because we let the right do what it did. Case in point, the election of Donald Trump. The rationale is because the left has given up the plot, really, and allowed someone with Trump's ideology, that kind of speak like it is type crap, where we shut down conversations instead of engage in conversation, that allowed that kind of person to get hooks in and win a victory. That should never have taken place. And not just because he's, really a narcissist, but it's because we dropped the ball and not because he had anything special.
Fair enough. It's interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon, the Donald Trump phenomenon, isn't it? Like, he really took over, like, not just conservative ideology, but he very much took over like everything that people saw as wrong in society. He became the fixer of it.
And that was only made possible because the left was so busy fighting amongst itself for, basically, let's picture this as a dinner table, okay? All the left was fighting over who would have the peas, and Donald Trump comes in and swipes up everything off the table, and everybody's like, oh, what the hell had just happened?
Right.
It's that constant, like, I'm part of the left. So when I'm critiquing the left, I critique myself just as much. So when I see that when we're shutting down conversations and we're practicing authoritarian tactics, then I can't say, well, I wonder how that happened. Well, I know why it happened. Let's fix that. And he's just the latest symptom of this. We've been doing it for years.
Yeah, it does always seem to be that way, doesn't it? Like, that's the left is always split into different groups, and the right is always just this one group that's like, okay, well, we'll just win over here.
Well, especially when you see groups like Antifa, for instance, that will go and start fights at peaceful protests over something like free speech, and I'm like going, that's a left thing to do, is to have free speech. What the hell? When you're caused of violence based on someone's words, then you've lost the plot, and then you become what you hate. You hate fascists because they're oppressive, yet you're going to oppress people through violence because you hate oppression. Boggles my mind. Anyway.
Well, thanks for talking to me, Ed. Do you have, I guess you have the Wayward Atheists to plug. Do you have other things as well that you do?
No, I used to do a podcast on my own called Everyday Atheist, but I gave that up when I joined the Wayward Atheists. So
okay. So I guess Wayward Atheists is where you're to find your stuff? Yeah,
you can find me at Wayward Atheist on Spreaker, Stitcher, and iTunes, and you can email us at waywardatheistpodcast@gmail.com, and I'm open to discussions. You can try. I would love for you to persuade me out of my beliefs. That's how wonderful. That's what I want you to do. So
perfect.
Go ahead.
Right on, man.
Right on. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you. It's been a good conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Now is the time for me to rise to my feet. Wipe your spit from my face, wipe these tears from my eyes.
So that was my interview with Ed. I made some notes about things I disagree with here and there, but for the most part, I think that this was a discussion about ideas. And while I could nitpick those points that I disagree with, There weren't any claims that needed to be fact-checked for accuracy. It wasn't like the discussions with Dustin and Randy where they made these claims about examples of behavior that they deemed out of control. There were no quotes taken out of context where I actually needed to fact-check it. Ed was great in this interview, and I really appreciate his time. It's unfortunate that we're not friends anymore, but as it turns out, sometimes people are much more reasonable when you talk to them than they are in online debates. You can probably hear that when I did this interview, I was starting to get a bit better at the process, and sometimes it helps when you have a good person to interview. Ed didn't come on with some prepared statements or stories or an agenda of any kind, and it really comes through in the interview. I didn't edit out any of the ums and ahs, or as many of them as I normally would. There might be a couple stutters in there that I could have edited out, but that I left in. I think it adds something to the flow of the conversation, and it adds to demonstrate the thoughtfulness that was involved. Anyway, I may address some of the notes I made from this interview in my final commentary episode on social justice, but for now, there's not much to say. Most people will be able to see where Ed and I disagree and where we kind of agree. If you want to find more of Ed's content, you can find it at www.spreaker.com/user/Wayward Atheists. And if you like this episode, then make sure to give me a rating and write a review on iTunes and share the show with anyone you think might enjoy it. If you think this show is worth continuing, then you can support me by becoming a patron at patreon.com/hardcoreskeptic and donate as little as $1 a month. You can find past episodes along with show notes at Spreaker.com/show/thehardcoreskepticexamines. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at hardcoreskeptic and like my Facebook page, facebook.com/hardcoreskeptic. If you want to get in touch with me, you can shoot me an email at mail@brainstormblog.net. And remember to check out my other show, The Brainstorm Podcast. You can find that at thebrainstormpodcast.com or brainstormblog.net. Thanks again for listening, and remember, the truth matters.